There are football matches, and then there are these. The sort of games that pull your soul out through your throat, run it across the coals for 96 minutes, and then ask if you'd like to go again next week. Last night, Barcelona and Inter gave us 7-6 madness. The kind of European drama that leaves neutrals breathless and fans of either side curled up in the fetal position. And today? Today we were offered something different. Not less intense. Just different. Paris Saint-Germain versus Arsenal. The return leg. 1-0 from the first leg. Knife-edge territory. And we got all the nerve-fraying, stomach-churning theater we could have asked for. 2-1 on the night, 3-1 on aggregate. PSG through to their second-ever Champions League final. That's what the record will show. But it won't tell you what it felt like. What it was. Because this wasn't just a match. It was a mood. It was a full-body experience. It started with hope, surged through chaos, flirted with disaster, and ended in a strange, quiet mixture of relief and regret. PSG fans will remember this as a night of celebration, sure, but if they're being honest, it was laced with anxiety. Right from kickoff, the air felt cracked. Like the pressure was baked into the floodlights. Because Arsenal, to their credit, came flying out like they'd been chained up for days and just now slipped the leash. Declan Rice was everywhere. Martinelli nearly broke Hakimi's ankles inside 6 minutes. Donnarumma, was called into action so early and so often, it felt like we were watching a highlight reel of his greatest saves before the match had even really settled. Rice had a free header. Missed. Martinelli tested the keeper. Denied. Odegaard's drive was tipped wide. Partey's throw-ins were launched like medieval siege weapons. It was siege football. Arsenal had one job, cause chaos. And for the opening 20 minutes, they were chaos incarnate. And yet, PSG scored first. That's football, isn't it? That moment when all your good intentions get drop-kicked by reality. One loose clearance, one magic touch from Ruiz, chest, left foot, boom. And Arsenal's early dominance was gone, burned to cinders in the shadow of one world-class finish. 2-0 on aggregate. The game hadn't even had time to breathe. But it had time to panic. Arsenal didn't fold. They did what teams who've been through the ringer do. They kept running into the fire, they pushed, they ran themselves ragged, and when Saka finally got one back, you could feel something shift. Maybe, just maybe. 2-1 on the night, still alive. Donnarumma had finally been beaten, and then... that miss. Bukayo Saka. Open goal. The kind of chance that eats at you in the dark long after the stadium lights are off. It was all there for him. The cross skipped past Donnarumma, laid up like an apology from the football gods, and he just leaned back. Stabbed it over. It hurt to watch. Not because it was comically bad, he didn't trip over the ball or swing and miss, but because it was so normal. A misfire at the worst possible moment. You could feel the camera zoom in on his face like a cruel X. That was the door back into the tie. And it stayed shut. After that, PSG shut it down, not spectacularly, not glamorously, but methodically. Hakimi added one, Vitina missed a penalty, Dembele got an assist the moment he touched the grass. It was a little bit of everything, from a side still figuring out if they're juggernaut or just lucky. And Arsenal? They didn't collapse. They drifted. Slower touches, half-second delays. You could almost hear the voice in their heads saying, what's the point? That's the thing. This wasn't a match about skill. Both teams had plenty. This was a match about moments, the ones you take, the ones you don't, the ones that follow you home. PSG are through, yes, but they are not clean, not invincible. They bled tonight. The question is, will that matter in the final? Because now it's Inter, in Munich. One game, 90 minutes, or maybe more to define a season. And for Arsenal, well, it's the long walk home, the aching feeling of what could have been. But we're not done yet. Let's dive into how we got there, minute by minute, mistake by miracle. First half, second half, heartbreak and havoc. Let's go back to the first whistle, the moment it all started unraveling, threading itself into something tense and tangled. The game began like a shot of espresso to the chest. Arsenal came roaring out with a purpose, a point to prove, and frankly, a look in their eyes that screamed, we didn't come here for a holiday. You could see it in the way Declan Rice pressed. You could see it in the first touch from Martinelli. You could feel it every time Donnarumma had to hurl himself across goal, like a man rescuing a phone from the edge of a cliff. The early stages? That was Arsenal's symphony. They dictated the tempo. They set the tone, They were first to every loose ball, every second ball, every third idea. And when Rice soared for that header and missed, that was the first crack in the glass. A moment. One of many. Because you don't dominate in Europe and miss chances like that. Not here. Not in Paris. Not with a 1-goal deficit. And yet Arsenal kept on coming. Timber was fearless. Odegaard had that quarterback swagger. And every time Partey cocked his arms back for another one of those trebuchet throws, you felt the whole stadium inhale. But for all the control, all the territory, all the storm they brought, they didn't score. And that's when the game turned. Subtly. Quietly. Like the room getting colder without you noticing. Kvaratskhelia hit the post, a reminder that PSG are always one shot away from flipping the script. And then came Ruiz. That goal felt like a betrayal of narrative. Not because it wasn't beautiful. It was. Chest control, let it drop, smash it through the earth's core. But because it came at a time when Arsenal had been dictating every rhythm. One moment, one crack of thunder. That's how quick it shifts. 1-0 on the night, 2-0 on aggregate. And suddenly, all the air Arsenal had been breathing got sucked out of the stadium. The rest of the first half, it was the sound of gears grinding. Arsenal tried to reassert themselves, but PSG had found their tempo now. They stopped panicking. They passed with more intention. They leaned on their technical midfielders. They remembered that they were, in fact, leading. And when the halftime whistle blew, it felt like both teams were walking off wondering how on earth they'd gotten to this exact scoreline. Second half begins, and if you're Arsenal, you're thinking, just 1 goal. Just give us a chance. And it very nearly came. Saka danced, Odegaard dipped into pockets, and for a moment, it felt like the rhythm was returning. Then chaos. It starts with a penalty. Hakimi's shot hits an outstretched arm. Lewis Skelly, the poor kid. It's harsh, sure, but welcome to the big leagues. Penalty given. Vitinha steps up, and in a weird way, it felt inevitable that it would be saved, because this wasn't a game of logic, it was pure feeling. Raya guesses right, dives hard, palms it wide. Arsenal lev. For now. But then, bam. Right after. Hakimi, cool as you like, edge-of-the-box pass from Dembele rolls into the corner with all the serenity of a man closing a book he's already read. 2-0 on the night, 3-0 on aggregate, and at that moment, felt like someone had cut the lights. But Arsenal, somehow, they sparked back to life. Trossard bulldozed his way through a tackle. Saka finally got his moment, scrambled finish, but it counted. 2-1 on the night. Could it be? Was there still time for one of those nights? Then that miss, the one we already mentioned, the one that will haunt Arsenal fans. Saka, alone, unmarked, ball bouncing perfectly, and he sends it over. Not wildly, just enough to be wrong, just enough to freeze time. You could almost hear the click of the clock hand that said, no comeback tonight. The rest of the game played out like a slow descent into acceptance. There was effort, plenty, but the belief, that had slipped. Calafiori came on, White came on, but nothing quite clicked. PSG sat deeper, slower, like a boxer who knows he just has to keep his feet moving to make it to the bell. Every pass Arsenal made in the final minutes felt like it carried too much weight. Every second PSG ran down felt like a slap. And when the whistle blew, there was no explosion, no roar, just a slow exhale across the Parc des Princes. PSG were through. Arsenal were out. Football, ruthless as ever, had chosen its story. But we've still got more to unpick. Because this wasn't just PSG winning and Arsenal losing. This was a clash of styles, of eras, of philosophies. Two teams who both believe in beautiful football. One going forward, the other just finally surviving. Let's talk about them, who they are, what they're chasing, and how this match revealed something about both. Let's talk about the teams, because this wasn't just a match, it was a study in contrasts. Two philosophies, two footballing psychologies, two different kinds of scars. Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain. Neither has ever lifted the Champions League trophy. Both have heard the whispers about their softness, their collapses, their nearly moments, and both came into this tie looking to rewrite something bigger than just a season. They were trying to rewrite character. Let's start with PSG. This wasn't the PSG of old, though the echoes were there. The flair, the glam, the occasional lapse into dramatic disinterest. But there was something new here, or at least something growing. They weren't brilliant for 90 minutes. Let's not kid ourselves, but they were pragmatic. They bent, but they didn't break. They looked uncomfortable in the first 20 minutes, right? Like someone had invited them to their own funeral. But they survived that stretch, and they grew, slowly, cautiously, like a team learning how to win, not with fireworks, but with discipline. What struck me, really struck me, was how together they were. Not perfect, not polished, but unified. They celebrated tackles like goals. They dragged each other through awkward phases. When Kvaratskhelia or Hakimi lost the ball, Ruiz or Neves covered. When Donnarumma punched instead of catching, which by the way he did about 17 times, Marquinhos was there to clear up the mess. This wasn't vintage PSG. But maybe vintage PSG is the thing that kept failing them. Ruiz, in particular, gave them a spine. His goal wasn't just a moment of quality, it was the signal, the turning point, the scene change. He carried himself like a man who's decided he doesn't want to go home early again. And around him, there was structure. Not always confidence, not always control, but structure. And what about Kvaratskhelia? He's chaos bottled up. He didn't dominate, but he had those flashes, cutting inside, rattling the post, flustering defenders. He's like a spark plug that misfires 90% of the time and then accidentally starts a fire. And PSG, maybe for the first time in a long time, are okay with that. They're letting players be something messy. Because finally, there's a balance behind them. Now, Arsenal. Oh, Arsenal. If PSG were pragmatic, Arsenal were romantic. All dream and risk and tempo. Mikel Arteta's side walked into the Lions' Den and tried to outpace the roar. And for a spell, it looked like they might just do it. That first half hour, it was some of the best football they've played all season. Maybe even all era. They were brave. They were purposeful. And yet it wasn't enough. And that's the pain of it, right? When your plan works, but the ball just refuses to go in. Arsenal didn't get dismantled. They got denied. Denied by a keeper in God mode. Denied by inches. Denied by one too many touches. Denied by time. It was like watching a beautifully written novel that gets pulped before it hits the shelves. Arteta's team are built to control games, but they couldn't control this one. Not in the ways that mattered. They won territory, possession, even the shot count, but they lost moments. And in knockout football, that's everything. Tactically, there was a lot to admire. Rice was immense in the first half. Partey offered physicality, Timber gave them drive, and Odegaard tried to puppet master from the middle. But the transitions hurt them. Every time they lost the ball in the final third, PSG had space. And the longer that went on, the more you could feel the balance tilting. What hurts more is this. Arsenal felt like the better side for large stretches. But football doesn't always reward narrative. It rewards execution. And in this case, PSG executed. Arsenal hoped. It's a learning moment, sure. But how many times do we have to say that about this team? Learning moment. Growing pains. Potential. At some point, don't you want to just arrive? Both teams showed us something. PSG showed they can do the ugly stuff. That they might just be past their preening, falling over in the spring selves. And Arsenal, they showed they're almost there. So close. You can feel it. But as the saying goes, almost doesn't win you anything in Munich. There's still one part left. One last chapter to this semifinal story. Because this wasn't just about PSG or Arsenal as collectives. It was about the individuals, the performances that cut through the system, the saves, the misses, the mistakes. Let's name names. Let's finish this right. Now we get to the names. The ones who lived it. The ones whose faces will linger in the memory, some in glory, some in torment. Because whatever your tactical setup, whatever grand narrative you're selling, football always comes down to individuals and moments. And last night, oh, the moments. Let's start with the obvious, Gianluigi Donnarumma. Good Lord. He played this match like he was auditioning for a time machine back to his teenage years when he broke onto the scene and made the world forget that goalkeepers were supposed to age into greatness. This was peak Donnarumma, the one who bends time. Every time Arsenal built a move, found space, pulled the trigger, you just knew. You felt it. That sinking, bitter truth. He's saving this. 6 minutes in, he was already flinging himself like a gymnast at a Rice header. 10 minutes later, he's flying left to parry Odegaard. The man was less a goalkeeper and more a climate event. When Arsenal finally did beat him, it came after a deflection, a scramble, and a small miracle of chaos. And still, it took until the 76th minute. He deserved to walk off with a cape. But across the pitch, David Raya was doing everything he could to match that. Saved a penalty, remember? Close to the post, low and awkward, and he got there. Saved his team from total collapse more than once. And yet, no one will remember his name the same way, because he played for the losing side. That's the cruelty. 2 keepers played out of their skins. Only one walks away with history. Now, Bukayo Saka. This is the part no one wants to say, and I'll say it with all the empathy possible. He'll carry that miss for a while, maybe forever, because the goal was open. The ball came to him with time, space, and nothing but glory in front of him. He panicked, snatched, sent it over. And that would be harsh if he hadn't also been Arsenal's spark plug for long stretches. He made things happen. He demanded the ball. He hit the top corner with a curling effort that only a godlike save kept out. But the truth is cruel. That moment defines his night, but it does. Football has no memory for context when there's a miss that big. The architect of the opener. What composure. To bring the ball down with his chest on the edge of the area, surrounded by red shirts, and hammer it low and clean past Raya, that takes a mix of arrogance and calm that's hard to coach. He played like a man who knew this might be his only window, and he refused to let it shut. Achraf Hakimi, meanwhile, decided to be the final word. He scored the goal that finished it, the one that broke whatever belief Arsenal had left. But it wasn't just the goal. His energy, his recovery runs, his willingness to explode forward when everyone else was breathing through a straw. It was classic Hakimi, the kind of player who can look like a risk for 70 minutes and then change the entire tone in 10 seconds. Martin Odegaard, for Arsenal, played like a man carrying too much. The ideas were there, the space wasn't. You could see the little flicks, the turns, the glances toward the wings. He was trying to make the chaos elegant. But it never quite came together. The pressure was relentless, and when the final pass didn't arrive, you could see it in his posture, like an artist with the right brush and no canvas. Declan Rice, heart of the midfield, engine of the press, lungs of the effort. He won back balls. He surged forward. He even missed a sitter. His night was everything Arsenal are at the moment, committed, brave, and just not quite decisive enough. There were others, of course. Timber, who battled like a man possessed. Partey, who launched more throw-ins than actual passes. Kvaratskhelia, who was a live wire and then a fuse. Vitinha, who danced and dazzled but missed the penalty that could have spared us the drama. Dembele, who stepped on for 5 minutes and changed the game with a single touch. It was a night of individuals, of fate choosing which ones would rise and which ones would fall. And now, PSG move forward, not on the wings of flair, but on the backs of those who showed resilience, grit, and just enough magic. Arsenal, they go home. No silver lining, no what-ifs that feel like consolation, just the reality that they had the chances, and they didn't take them. This match wasn't cruel. It was honest. It didn't punish Arsenal unfairly. It just reminded them that beautiful football means nothing if you don't bury your chances. And that, in the end, is what PSG did better. They survived. They thrived. They're going to Munich, and this has been Across the Pitch. Over and out.